All right, welcome everybody to another episode of Agency Leads and Sales Pros. I am your host, Tyler Narducci, and today with me, I have Christian Banach. Christian is the principal and chief growth officer of a business development and growth consultancy that helps marketing agencies and martech companies land 6 and 7 figure opportunities predictably. Over the last 20 years, Christian has been an agency owner, an outbound sales team leader, a business development director, working hard with award-winning agencies like Energy BBDO, DDB, and Barkley, helping them to win millions of dollars of new business from companies like Anheuser-Busch, InBev, and Kohls, among many others. Christian, thank you so much for taking the time and doing this episode with us.
Absolutely, Tyler. Really looking forward to this conversation. Thanks for having me on.
Absolutely. So we can totally just dive right in. So one amazing thing about you is that you built up your personal brand, and that helped you scale your agency into a 7 figure powerhouse. Can you just kind of explain for us how you did that with your personal brand, and what are some things that our listeners can learn to kind of use these tools for themselves?
Yeah, most definitely. So when I originally thought about having this company, B2B companies get a kind of a bad rap, right? They don't have a lot of personality. They're boring. They're not as sexy and as fun as some of the more consumer facing. So with that insight in mind, right off the bat, I was looking for ideas on what can I do to stand out? And so with that in mind, I also reflected around my first business. So my first business was actually a concert promotions business. And it was a branded company. There was, I didn't put myself in front and center. And I actually, people called me the Wizard of Oz. There were these big concerts that would happen, and I would be sort of the guy behind a curtain. Nobody knew that I was the one involved in all of this. And uh, while it might seem like a compliment, that Wizard of Oz comment, I always felt like, I was maybe leaving something on the table there, because by not putting myself out there more, that there might have been opportunities that I was being passed by, because these big concerts that we would do, nobody really knew who was behind them. So when I started this company here, it was like, with that insight of my experience with my first company, and then the fact that these, B2B companies need some personality, and, there's sometimes a trust, issue also with B2B companies. I thought, I'm going to put myself out there. So, the company, right out of the gates, I mean, I named it Christian Banach, my own name. So that helped right there. But, from really day one, it was really about trying to inject, my own personality into the business. And one of the key ways that we were able to grow early on was through an email newsletter that I developed, and it shares a motivational, inspirational type story, something personal from my life. I try to wrap it up into a business, lesson as well. And then I share, other industry insights. But that newsletter has really allowed people to connect with me on a very personal level. And I get emails, all the time from people that, they don't even really know what we do, but they connected with me in the story, and they're like, I would love to just learn about what you guys do. And that's been a really key insight, as well, that if you're able to build up that brand and build that trust, people will actually come knocking on your door asking what you do, versus you having to knock on theirs and kind of put yourself out there.
At this point, you were still doing the concert business or setting up concerts?
No. So the concert business, that actually, I shut that down maybe about 10 years ago. And for the last, say,
Okay.
10 years, I have been working in various agencies doing business development. But
Okay.
what had happened was, right around the pandemic, I always wanted to do something on my own again, and I wasn't really sure what or when or how. And what I ended up seeing is that a lot of agencies were really struggling in the pandemic, and I felt like I had an opportunity to give back. So I was working at an agency actually at the time, and had this idea to start this business. And but where do I begin? Where do I start? Yes, I worked at agencies, but I didn't have a brand at that time. Nobody knew who I was. So that's really where my go-to-market strategy really initiated, with this email newsletter.
Okay. So you started building a newsletter and getting that out there. I guess, how did you start growing the newsletter? Where were you getting the emails from to send out to? And where were you, I guess, generating the copy from? Were these your own ideas? Were you sitting down late night writing this, or how did you start it?
Yeah, so the newsletter, in terms of building the audience, it was really twofold. We we do for our clients, and I had done previously a lot of outbound marketing. So, I had access to different databases and different scrapers and LinkedIn and all of that. So, a lot of it was cold, outreach that we initially started to build the list with. And then, as time grew, and people started learning more about us and me, more organic, opt-in, signups started coming. So the newsletter sort of took off, from there. In terms of writing the copy, it was all myself, and yes, it was late nights. I do it every Monday, as I mentioned, Monday motivation. So usually it's Sunday night at 10 o'clock. Oh shoot, I gotta write something for tomorrow. But I try to get ahead of it, but I feel like it seems more authentic when I'm sort of up against the gun and up against a deadline. I usually come up with better ideas. So yeah, that's really, it was really just me, myself. I mean, even today, the newsletter is really, just myself and my thoughts. I really want to keep it personal. I've thought about trying to outsource it to somebody on my team or freelancers, but I think, it would lose that authenticity that, that's become what the newsletter is all about.
Yeah. So your audience was digital marketers and agency owners, and your content was your thoughts on how to improve the industry and that business model and challenges that they were meeting, or was it more digital marketing strategy? Like what was the content based
Yeah.
on?
So interestingly enough, the content there's a couple different sections, if you will. The main piece of the content was really more inspirational type stories with a business lesson kind of wrapped into it. It wasn't about how to sell better agency services or how to run your business better. That was not really it. It was more so getting to know me and my personal life, and
Mhm.
wrap it into kind of a business lesson that I took away from it. And then I also include in the newsletter, different chief marketing officers that have moved to different companies. So I would basically provide some insights and leads to agencies that they could potentially see. Oh, the CMO had moved on. Maybe I should reach out, because oftentimes if a CMO moves on, they're going to be looking for a new agency in their new role. So I would provide some insights like that, and then occasionally I would write some, how you were talking about, more thought leadership type content around how you can grow your specific agency. But that's really maybe 1 out of every 4 weeks I include something like that, and it's really more so about getting to know me on a more personal level, is what the newsletter is.
That's awesome. So you really built your entire personal brand solely on the email newsletter? Was there also like, a Facebook group involved, or was there also other elements like a page that you're growing or a podcast you started? Were there other elements to the personal brand that helped uh because I'm leading up to how you took that and ended up with a seven-figure agency. So wondering, was it just the newsletter or what else did you do?
Yeah, so the newsletter definitely was the foundation for it, but we have a
Yeah.
website, as well. So
Mhm.
that was where we would end up sending people. What we found is that the newsletter wasn't really selling anything, but if there was interest in, who is this guy? I like his stories. He seems pretty interesting. They could click on the website and click from a link in the newsletter to go to the website, and that's where they would find out about our services. So that was one of the kind of non intrusive ways to try to like get our name out there. But also at the same time, I would repurpose the same content that I was writing for the newsletter on LinkedIn, and similarly, do strategically, add connections to agency owners and leaders and others that are in my target audience. So building up a social profile on LinkedIn was really the next phase of that, and
Yeah.
that's probably how it was for the first, say, 6 months. And then after around 6 months, that's when I started doing some podcast appearances, like I'm doing here today, and started getting invited to speak at virtual conferences and webinars and things like that. So, but I really needed to started to build my own little audience before I was getting invites to these podcasts and these other speaking events. And it all really, again, started with that email, and then into the LinkedIn profile as well.
Very nice, very nice. So I guess how then do we bridge? So you took this path up. I'm going to start building on my own personal branding. How did we then take that and escalate it into a seven-figure agency?
Yeah, well, what was great is, when I first started the newsletter, I didn't have any clients, and
Hmm.
so I was able to, through my network, through my own personal network, land, I think 2 clients to start off with. So that at least gave me enough income coming in that I could afford to quit the job that I had and go all in on this. But really, it was again, the newsletter was really where we first got our first, few clients. And then that just allowed me to go out and hire for my first staff member. And then, that led to referrals. That was another, way, once we would start doing good work for our clients, they would, pass along, our us, if you will, to other companies that are out there. So, really kind of snowballed. But I think what we ended up doing was once we had once we were in a position that there was some awareness of my name and some demand for the services, we started doing more targeted one-to-one outbound outreach to agencies. Now, what I experienced here is that I'm sure we all receive emails all the time, or we've seen emails or things on LinkedIn about, hey, we're going to book 30 appointments in 30 days, and there's a lot of noise in the space. There's a lot of empty promises. A lot of operators that do kind of lead generation and services like that aren't necessarily the most trustworthy, if you will.
Yeah.
So
Yes.
I wanted to make sure I stood out from that, and that's where the newsletter came in again too, and the personal brand. I think if they could trust me, then they would trust our services. So when we started to then do more one-to-one outreach and reach out to these different companies and say, hey, we've been looking into your business. We think we could, help you with growth. We'd like to talk about that. They trusted our emails, and they trusted us more because they already knew us, through the newsletter. But that's where we really started to then accelerate the growth, was through the more, one-to-one outbound, emails and phone calls, to these agencies. But I don't feel if we did not have that initial newsletter and the LinkedIn presence that we would have been able to cut through nearly as well as we ended up doing.
Yeah, it was like an accelerator to the business.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I experienced a lot of that myself when, because I drove the agency first, but as soon as I really started, face on everything and really blending my name and the agency name and kind of utilizing that personal brand like you're talking about, it was like pouring gasoline on the fire because, people, they learn to know, love, and trust you and what you have to say. And if you're running that operation, then that trust naturally carries over. And so, I couldn't agree with you more that personal branding can really, really help a lot of B2B businesses, but especially digital marketing agencies in the digital space. So it's a phenomenal tactic to use. So, what do you think most agencies get wrong when it comes to business development? We all want to grow, we all want to get bigger. What do you think most of us out there are doing wrong?
Yeah, I think it's kind of what we just started to talk about. I think one is a lot of them, first and foremost, are just sitting around waiting for the phone to ring. They think that they're going to post a blog, and all these companies are going to come and find them, or maybe they don't even post a blog, and they've just kind of grown organically through word of mouth and referrals. But at some point in time, that's going to dry up, or it's not going to lead you in a direction that you ultimately want to grow in. Because if you're just dealing with people within your network, you might work with one company in one industry, and then you might work with another company in another industry, and you're never really getting an expertise in any one particular area. You're just kind of doing whatever comes your way, and that can get you to a certain point, especially if you have a big network, can get you to a certain point. But ultimately, if you really want to get to the next level, you have to have some level of expertise and specialization, I believe, at least. So I think that is one thing, is that all far too many just rely on sort of word of mouth and referrals to grow. But I think those that are recognizing that, hey, we need to do more than just that. I think what they get wrong is, again, kind of what we were talking about before, is we really see it as two sides. You have to be able to build awareness and demand for your agency and this types of services and problems that you solve. And then you also have to have a way to capture that demand as well. And that's, really through what we believe is, again, more of that proactive, outbound emails, sometimes outbound cold calls, because at the end of the day, whether you've built up the demand or not, these prospects that you're reaching out to, they're very busy, and there's a lot of competition that is out there. So even if they, know who you are, you still have to go after them and more proactively, take the next step to try to build that relationship, with them. And I see a lot of companies come to us and they want to jump right into, let's just start sending out outbound emails and let's get leads. And we can do that, and will see some level of success. But if you really want to get success, it's about building that awareness and demand, just like we had talked about. And leveraging a personal brand is a way, one of many ways that you can help your firm build awareness and demand.
So if you have someone that runs a digital marketing agency, because I'm sure I can speak for a lot of the audience when I say they're probably conflicted, going, "Ugh, I know building a personal brand could definitely, help explode my agency, but I just really don't want to put my face on all this. I don't want to be the face. I don't want to be the voice." Me personally, I didn't have any problem with it, and it was awesome. But what would be your advice to those people that are like, "I don't want to put my face on it"? Is it like, go get another face and then you and partner with them so that can be the face, or can you go at this a different way, other than really using just one person's face for the agency?
Yeah, I mean, my first bit of advice is, I learned a lesson from my first business, as I mentioned. I was the Wizard of Oz. I didn't want to put myself out there. I felt like it was egotistical, to do that, and I, but like I said, I believe that it held me back, and I think that business would have grown even faster and bigger, had I done that. Now, that said, I know it's not for everybody. I mean, it wasn't for me, back then, so I don't necessarily think it's an absolute requirement. What can you do about it if it's not for you? I think perhaps you do have a partner, or someone within your firm that you can elevate to be more of that face of the organization. So I think that's definitely something that one could explore. Again, you may not have that person, especially if you're just starting off and you're just a team of one or two. So I think if you're doing all the other things right, in terms of your marketing, and I still think you have to be producing some thought leadership. You have to have a point of view on how to solve a problem, even if it's not putting your face in a video to talk about it, but you have to at least be able to articulate it through writing of some sort. I think if you're not willing to do that either, even if you're not the face put in front of it, I think it's going to be really challenging to get things started if you're not putting yourself out there and you're not at least putting your thinking out there.
Yeah, it kind of leads into how important it is to do work. Sometimes you really have to put in a little bit of elbow grease. Sometimes that you really have to, actually get out there and do something, and you can't, just hope that it will magically happen. I talk to so many clients out there that, when you ask what's your main source of leads right now and how have you been getting your original clients, they completely echo what you already said, which is my immediate network, then they will refer me, and then I'll get another client or two from those referrals. And I've always kind of looked at that like it's so unstable, because you can't I've had amazing clients before, incredible clients that we did really great work with. They were great. We bonded with them. It was such a great relationship, but they had no one to refer us to. And they would if they did, but they had no one to refer us to. So it's not even a guarantee in any way, shape, or form that that referral will come, even in the best case where you're doing great work and you have a great relationship with the client. So you can't really rely on that. You really have to be able to get into that cold network and pull people in with a strong offer and a voice that has something to say, like you said,
Mhm.
in the field. And I think this kind of leads us really well into my next question, which is about relationship making. So, as you know, relationship making is really important for marketing agencies. But can you tell us what relationship making is to you, and why do you consider it to be the future, or dependent, or I guess not dependent, really important to the future growth of digital marketing agencies?
Yeah, so this idea of relationship making is something that we've really grasped onto, over the last, 6 months or more. And, I think what we're seeing in professional services, which is what agencies are doing, is that it is relationship based type of business. Most have grown through word of mouth and referrals. But as we've talked about, it's not a scalable solution to just rely on word of mouth and referrals. So, how do you take what you're able to do with those relationships, but how do you systematize it in a way that you can still have that personal relationship and but do so at a level of scale and operationalize it. So when we think about again in a lot of things that you're going to hear out there, it's more so about, hey, we generate leads, and but to us leads are more of a short-term transactional type of thing. We like to think of it more as, we're here to help build relationships and how to start those relationships, which I think is a little bit of a different mindset. There's some research that's out there that only somewhere in the neighborhood of like 3 to 5% of the market is even in market to buy services like yours at any given time. So that means 97, 95% of the market is not ready to buy right now. Doesn't mean they won't be in 3 months, 6 months, 9 months, a year, but you have to think about it more long term. You can't just think about it as, all right, we're going to send out an email, or we're going to place an ad, and we're going to get these leads that are going to flow in, and we're going to close all this business. You have to think about it, from a longer term approach, that we're going to build these relationships over time, and over time, when they're ready, they're going to come to us. So that's, I think, the approach that we've always tried to take. Like, that's why we have the newsletter, that we're not out there trying to sell services in the newsletter. It's about building a relationship, letting them know me, and start to connect with them on a digital level. And to us, relationship making, it's not just starting, oh, we meet the prospect, we take them out to lunch, and that relationship making begins with your brand, really, whether it be your personal brand or your company brand, and what you stand for and who you are, and building that awareness and getting in front of them is where that relationship actually starts. And then when they're ready, then they will start to engage with you, and then it's taking that relationship and adding value back to them, constantly providing value back, and then nurturing that relationship, understanding that they may not be ready again in market right now, but understand this is a long term type of process. And for me, that's really been a game changer for us as a company, and really how we advise our clients and work with our clients on is thinking things a little bit differently. Otherwise, you're only trying to go for that quick hit that happens, and we love those. I mean, hey, I'm not going to say that if somebody wants, I meet tomorrow and they want to give me money for a client project, I'm going to say no. But I don't look for those types of opportunities. I look for building relationships. So again, it really kind of goes back to, how do we create awareness and demand, and then how do we capture and nurture that demand over time as well.
Yeah, honestly, I couldn't agree with you more. What you just said is super, super valuable, and it was one of the main things that helped me to rapidly grow my agency as well. Was realizing that not everybody is a one call close, and realizing that not everything is a quick win. And you're right, those do come along and they're so great and they feel amazing. But if you rely solely on those, then you're going to be severely limited, right? And especially when you consider, like, a lot of agencies out there, myself included, are spending money on paid advertising. And when you're spending all this money and you're getting people to click in, go through your funnel, book a call, have a chat, and you're building that relationship on that call, it's not just a sales call, it's a relationship building call between you and that person who, like you said, 97% of the time is not even ready to buy, but they still took the action to book the call, to learn more about their services, because they do know that they need help in their business in that category. They may just be either not financially ready, or whatever could be going on in their life at that time that's not ready to pull the trigger. And if you don't have the systems in place to continually nurture that relationship that you're talking about, that lead, then when they are ready in a month, 2 months, 6 months, we've closed deals 3 years later. They came, booked a call with us, talked to us, and then were in my newsletter, were in my Facebook group, listened to my podcast, different things like that. And 3 years later, now they're our client. And I think most agencies out there would have missed that client, because not only would they have long forgotten about them and moved on, but they wouldn't have put them into that ecosystem that you're talking about, where you're constantly providing value. You're constantly showing that you're an authority in the space, and you're constantly that reminder of when I am ready, that's who I want to go to. And it's critical. And it's probably where 50% or more of our deals come from is those, people that were in the space and made the decision later after they've, really, I guess been nurtured. I think that's probably more I think you're just using a little bit less of the buzzwords, which I like because we all have those buzzwords that we all know. And lead nurturing would be like probably the most common one, but you're right. I love it on relationship building. So agency owners are constantly trying to stay ahead of their competition, like we're talking about right now, and market trends. Why do you feel it is important for agencies to now reimagine their go-to-market strategies for today's B2B buyers and not kind of get stuck in, one strategy that may have worked for them even just last year?
Yeah, well, what we're seeing in the agency space is that things are rapidly changing. We're in this recession. Maybe we're in a recession. Maybe we're going to be in
Who
a
knows?
recession. Period. But at the end of the day, everybody's a little bit more nervous, and we're seeing longer sales cycles. We're seeing budget cuts. We're seeing uh, companies that are taking a lot of work in house now. They're not necessarily working with outside agencies. So it's a really interesting and rapidly changing time period here. And beyond that, just at a more macro level, even the B2B buying experience has really changed. You think back maybe let's say 20 years ago, the web was it was out there, but people they didn't have as much of a presence, these companies, as they do nowadays. So they had to talk to salespeople to get any sort of information about what they do. These days they don't need to talk to a salesperson. They can go on the web. They can now ask chat gpt. There's so many different ways that they can get information. They can go to Facebook and LinkedIn communities and things like that. So to think that it's this sort of linear process that people go through, and it's fundamentally that's just not how it works. And I don't think others have kind of realized that. So it again, it's all kind of dovetails into what we've been talking about here. It's about having that presence with yourself, whether it be a personal brand or your company brand or both. Creating thought leadership content, so these people, these prospects that are out there, they can start to learn about you, because they're probably they're going to be doing a lot of the research on their own. They don't need to call and talk to you. And when they do, might already be 70 or 80% down the funnel, at that point, already. So you really just got to keep that in mind. And it really all kind of matters in sense of you have to be creating content for each of the different stages of the buyer journey. There is awareness content, there's consideration content, there's decision content. So being mindful again of that journey and making sure that you're showing up with content that is valuable for whatever stage they happen to be in. You have to keep in mind all the level of competition that's out there. One thing that we work with our clients on is we call it a give to get. And so when we do reach out to prospects, first and foremost, we're not saying, hey, we would just love to get 15 minutes on your calendar so we could tell you all about us and all the awards we won and how great our services are and all of that. Like, there's just nothing in it for the prospect themselves. So, what we like to work with our clients on is coming up with something unique. Maybe that's an insight session. Maybe that's a free workshop. Maybe that's an audit. Maybe that is inviting them on a podcast like this and giving them some publicity. Maybe it's a virtual panel where you can get together other industry leaders and unpack an idea. So the idea here is that you're going to give them some sort of value back before you're going to ask for something, back from them, which ultimately is their time. And we just find that is a much better way to cut through, all the clutter that's out there. And again, help to start that relationship. You're giving them something. It's just human nature for them to want to, give something back to you. It's the law of reciprocity. So, I think just the kind of the old school ways of thinking about it, you really got to understand like what's happening in the market and what's happening in the buyer journey, and make sure that you're adapting your approach, accordingly.
Give to get strategy. Guys, write that down because that is so valuable. I can't tell you how much that I've seen that work really well. And even someone like me, that would work on me. If someone reaches out to me and says, hey, I noticed this thing that I think could really be better, and either here's what I would do, or would you like to hop on and I can share it with you, that automatically is more attractive than, hey, I do X, Y, and Z. Do you want to hop on and chat to learn about it? Because it's like, no, I wasn't even looking for X, Y, and Z right now. And they would have had to get really lucky if I just happened to be needing that at that moment, and then they hit me with that email, which is very hard to do. So offering value up front is by far one of the best tips out there for growing a digital marketing agency. And when you're growing that ecosphere that Christian was talking about earlier, where you have, whether it's a newsletter, a group, a podcast, all of it, or more, that's all you're doing. You're constantly providing value, providing value, and having those call to actions throughout. So one day when they see that value and they're ready, then they're going to hop on. I also really like, you mentioned audits. I think that's a fantastic strategy when there's software out there that you can use to then pull a potential leads website through the software. It grades it and gives immediate places for improvement. You can tell if they're running ads, if they're not, and create just a small 5 point, 5 point document on things that you could help them improve on, and then ask for that call, and then get them on the call, go through those things. And now they know who you are. They trust you. You've built a relationship, and you're the right person for the job really at that point, once they've kind of, made that relationship and seen what you actually can do. So it's a phenomenal strategy. Christian, what is Propel?
Yeah, Propel is our go-to-market strategy, and it's a framework, and it's an acronym, Propel. So each one of the letters stands for something. So the P of Propel is pick a pivotal problem, and I think this is another thing that I see agencies, and even especially digital agencies, getting wrong, is that they might say, "Well, what problem do you solve?" Well, we build websites for companies that need them. But a website isn't a problem. It's a potentially a solution to a problem. But the problem is our sales are down or our leads are down, and a new website potentially could solve that problem. But I talk with agencies all the time, and they have a really tough time actually articulating what problems that they actually solve. And they do solve problems, but they don't think about it in those terms. They jump right to the solution. So the Propel model really is first and foremost getting clear on that. And ideally, though, these problems are urgent and important for the prospect to solve, because if it's just something nice for them to do, it'll incrementally help their business. The odds of them wanting to take action, especially from a cold email or an ad, is very slim. So you really want to get clear on how do you solve problems that are both urgent and important for the prospect to solve. And you don't necessarily just have to have one problem you solve. You probably solve 3, 4, 5 different problems, but you want to get really good at solving a problem, and then that becomes the foundation of that go to market strategy. The next part of Propel is the research audience segment. So now that you know what problems that you solve, you're going to want to know what audiences are experiencing that problem. Is it a certain industry? Is it a certain type of company? Is it certain companies in a certain geography? But here you want to build out like an ideal company profile. You want to build out buyer persona, so who within those companies are experiencing that problem, and ultimately you want to land at coming up with a list of potential companies that are experiencing that particular problem. And then that's the list then that you could start to do your sales and marketing efforts to.
The P in there, I everything. I can tell you how many clients I talk to that I ask, um, you know, what do you do as an agency? What do you do? And the answer is Facebook ads. It's Google ads. It's website builds. It's SEO, and that's honestly oftentimes my very first lesson is people do not buy Facebook ads, or people do not want to buy Google ads. They don't want to buy a new website. They don't want to rank on Google. They want what that means. They want growth for the business. They want, people have many different reasons for wanting to grow their business, for an additional layer to take care of my family, to, whatever those deep reasons are. And finding that problem out on the sales call and during the relationship building process is critical, because if you just come as a service provider, one of millions that provides Facebook ads or Google ads, you're going to get lost in the noise, and you're not going to really connect with that person to be able to build that relationship. And, agencies often get services and solutions mixed all the
Yep.
time. It's one of the biggest mistakes that I see in the industry. And so I'm actually really glad that you brought that up, because knowing the difference between them is really critical. And also, while I'm on the rant, I'll say that on the sales side of agencies, if you go, I talk to my sales guys all the time, and I'm telling them, and they'll come to me and be like, "Hey, we're talking to this lead and they want X, Y, and Z." And they're like, "So when you're doing the ads, how do you then send it over here? And what do you then do?" And I'm like, "Stop. You're going way too far into technicals right now. And that's not really where the sale is made." The prospect that knows nothing about Google ads or Facebook ads does not want to know exactly how you build the core lookalike audience, and who you're, interest layering that over. They don't need to know all that. That's not what's selling them. They need to know that it's going to provide the solution to their problem. So right back to what Christian said, what is the problem? And is the answer more lead generation, more sales for the business? Then yes. And that's what we do. Keep it at that level. That's where the sale is actually made. Because when we go too far down those rabbit holes, you're going to lose the sale. And it's the service. It's not the problem, like you said.
Yeah.
Christian, what tactics and strategies work for awareness and demand creation?
Well, yeah, actually, I'd love to go back. I just started with Propel, the P and the R. So if it's okay, I'd love
Oh
to
my gosh.
go through the rest of the
I,
process.
I think I was so impressed with the P that I just like threw the whole rest of the word on P. So okay, we're backing up. We're going on to R. So Propel is an acronym, and we're now on R. Go
Yeah.
back. Sorry.
Yeah. So the R is the research the audience segments, which we talked about, the ICP and the buyer personas, and how that applies to the pivotal problem. I think we're on O now, which is own the journey. So the PRO, and
Mm,
then that goes back to what we started talking about earlier with the buyer journey, and really making sure that now that you have the problem and you know the audience, what are the questions, what are the objections that they're having at the different stages of the journey. So at the consideration stage, the awareness stage, the decision stage, what type of content are you going to need for each one of those different stages. So that's really, again, we talked about this one a little bit earlier, so I won't go into too depth on the O, but that's really key. The next part of Propel, so now we have PRO and P. Now it's really about providing value. So that's, again, what we had talked about, earlier. So getting clear on what is that offer, what is that give to get that you're going to provide them. So that's the second P. The next one, E, is of Propel, is evaluate channels. And this is where you're going to want to think about where does this target audience hang out. Are they on LinkedIn? Are they on email? Do they go to certain events? Are they in certain online communities? Are they on TikTok? There is so
yeah.
many different channels that are out there, and especially if you're a small agency, you can't be on all of them. So you really need to do your homework and understand, where are they living, and where are they living at each of the different stages of the journey. Maybe at the awareness stage, they're at one channel, but the decision stage, they're at a different channel. So that's where that comes in. And so it's really evaluating the different channels and figuring out and prioritizing the ones that, make the most sense, for you. And then the last part of Propel, the L, is to launch, experiments, and scale. And we like to look at all of these different campaigns that we would do as experiments, because that's really what it is. Nobody knows for sure if it's going to work. If you've done your homework and, we believe you've gone through our process, you're going to get it right more times than not. But at the end of the day, some are going to hit home runs. And if they do, how do we do more of them? How do we double, triple, quadruple, what we're doing? But the ones that aren't performing as well, do we just make a tweak to it, or do we need to pivot, altogether? So we like to look at these as like 30-day sprints and start to look for positive signals. By a positive signal, I don't necessarily mean, hey, you won, a business, you want a big deal from it. It means, like, are you getting the right types of traction? Are you getting inquiries? Are you getting positive indicators, again, that this seems to be working? And if that's the case, again, do more of it. And if it's not, but we like the 30-day period because, we think it's enough time to, again, be able to start to see positive, results, but it's not too much time that you're going to spend 6 months trying something and then it doesn't work. And next thing you know, you're, again, half the year is over, and now you're stuck back from square one. So it's really kind of taking a page out of software development and web development, these kind of 30-day sprints or experiments, however you want to look at it. So that's really the process then that we bring people through is Propel. Each one of those different steps builds on each other. But at the end of this, you will have a plan on how you can bring your brand to market. How are you going to get from point A, wherever you're at today, to point B, where you want to go ultimately?
And so it takes 30 days to get through like one full Propel cycle then, I guess?
No, Propel, itself, usually when working with clients, that could take anywhere from 6 to 8 weeks. But
Okay.
out of Propel, you're gonna come up with some different ideas, right? Okay, here's the pivotal problem, here's the audience, here's the offer, the give to get that we're gonna do, here's the channel. So you're gonna know all those variables, and then you put that into market in a 30-day experiment. And then you see kind of how it's going. And coming out of a Propel process, we might have a couple of different experiments that we want to try. Let's try this problem and that problem. Let's try this audience and that audience. So you have a couple different iterations of it. You put it into market, you see how it goes. And at the end of the 30 days, if it's working, we do more of it. If it's not working, let's make some tweaks, or maybe we just scrap that experiment and we try something else.
I love it. I love it. All right. So now back to our next question. What tactics and strategies work for awareness and demand creation for digital marketing agencies?
Yeah, I think what some of the ones that we tend to gravitate to, again, we do like to consider every client that we work with is different. Every agency is a little bit different. Markets are different, but some of the tried and true ones that seem to work in most cases, first and foremost, like we've talked about, thought leadership. It's really about but not just creating content to create content, because there is no shortage of content out there. I think with chat GPT and the like, it's only going to get even worse. So you really have to have a point of view on something. What is your method, your process, something different that you can bring to the market on how to solve, again, those pivotal problems. For us, our point of view is the relationship making. That is how we like to go to market and how we like to build the businesses for our clients. For you, the listener, your point of view will be something else depending on what you do. But you have to stand for something, or else you're going to stand for nothing. So thought leadership is key. Now, creating the content is one thing. It's also making sure you get the eyeballs on it is another. So where we also like, LinkedIn has been a great channel in a couple different ways. Organically posting on LinkedIn is great, especially from back to our conversation about like the personal brand, but the founder or key executives profiles. We see better results coming from the individuals within the organization versus say the company page. More
Mhm.
people want to follow a person than they want to follow a company. So having a strategy for LinkedIn organic is important. And then LinkedIn paid ads, I think, are also something worth exploring as well. What I like about LinkedIn ads is that you're able to target, the exact companies, the exact titles, sometimes the exact individuals, even within those organizations that you want to get in front of. So it's another, way to get your message in front of the right folks. Podcasting we've found to be, also a really good, source, whether it be exposing yourself to the audience of that podcast or just as a piece of content then that you can repurpose for your social channels or your email newsletter. And then that blends me to email newsletters. Obviously, I would be remiss if I didn't say that wasn't a great, way to build awareness and demand, because obviously we talked about that earlier, that, we've really kind of built a company, around the email newsletter. So, those are kind of five that we tend to gravitate to, but, everybody's a little bit different. But I think if you're experimenting and you're trying out, I think those are five that are really good to at least consider.
Those 5 are all super strong, very phenomenal. I'll keep my comments to just 2 of them. 1, love that you said LinkedIn, because LinkedIn is not dead. A lot of people have a misconception that LinkedIn is just full of spam. Like when they log in and they see all these messages that, are kind of sent from bots, and they're like, oh, it's just all spam. Like there's no one really on LinkedIn. Shockingly, we see a lot of success on LinkedIn, and our clients also see a lot of success on LinkedIn. Um, usually there has to be a lot of real personalization. Like you can cut through the noise on LinkedIn, I feel like, when you don't sound like a bot, and you have real people actually engaging in the DMs, and not just like, hi, I do this. Do you do this? Like, and it just, when you personalize it, LinkedIn is doing phenomenally in 2023, which a lot of people don't realize. And the other one is the method thing. The very first one that you said, where if you can kind of brand your methodology on how you do something, you can cut through the noise instead of being, Facebook ads and then retargeting Facebook ads to a funnel. If you actually can brand, similar to Propel actually, which is if you can take your methodology, even if it's somewhat similar to other methodologies, but it's unique in the way that you deliver it, or in the tools that you use, or whatever, and you can actually brand your methodology with an acronym or whatever, the Tyler method, for example. Then that can help stand you out among the crowd, because that immediately creates that intrigue value of, well, what's the Tyler method? Now immediately I know that he's not just giving me Facebook ads like everybody else. There's some type of methodology behind it that's specific to this agency that's working for them. I love that, and I see that work very, very well. Um, what do you think is a smart approach to streamlining business generation for agencies?
Smart approach to streamlining business operations, did you say? Or
Business generation. So, I mean, it could be kind of similar to, our last question, but what do you think is a smart approach to streamlining business generation for new agencies? So, generating the lead and then closing the lead in as fast as possible.
yeah. Um, I think there's a couple different ways I want to approach this. What we've seen is, if you've done a good job of building the awareness and demand, then you are going to be getting inbound opportunities. So that right off the bat will streamline, because now they're coming to you when they're ready versus you reaching out to them when they might be in the 97% that aren't in market right now. So the awareness and demand creation side will definitely help. And I think the other way, and it's related to the awareness and demand as well, is that if they know you and they like you and they trust you, the odds of them, converting faster is much better, because they may not need to go out and look and vet you against, five other, Facebook agencies that, are out there, because they already understand who you are and what you do, and they don't need to go out and look for it. So you can kind of bypass that whole process. So, I think all of this kind of ties, together in many different ways. I think another thing, again, and we've talked about this, is about the nurturing piece. In many ways, though, you can't speed up the timeline in B2B sales, right? We'd love to, but
Yeah.
there's budgets, there's other priorities, there's things like that can happen. But what I do see happening is the failure to nurture those leads. They forget about you, and if you are doing a good job of nurturing, you can definitely capture a lot of opportunities that would have otherwise just fallen off, and they may not have moved forward with any vendor, period.
Hmm.
But if you've done a good job of nurturing them and staying in front of them and on their radar screen, and continue to build that demand for your services over time, they might be more apt to move forward with you, otherwise they may not have moved forward with anybody.
Totally agree. I have two last questions for you, Christian. The first one of them is, how can digital marketing agencies land six and seven figure opportunities more predictably? And then my last one is one that I ask everybody as a last question. So this is your last big question.
Yeah. So as far as the key word there is predictably, and this is a good way to kind of maybe put a bow on this whole conversation here.
Yeah.
Uh, Word of mouth and referrals are great, but they're not a predictable growth strategy. You don't know when they're going to come in. You don't know if they're going to come in. You don't know who they're going to come in from. we look at those as a bonus. I don't want to build a business, around solely something that's out of my control. So it really boils down to, if you want to land 6 and 7 figure opportunities predictably, you have to have a process. And that process, in our opinion, begins with having that go to market strategy, having a plan to get from point A to point B, and then having a way to create that awareness, create that demand, as we've talked about, and then a way to capture that demand, whether that's through outbound emails, whether that's through LinkedIn ads, or LinkedIn, DMs, whatever the method is, or multiple methods. But ultimately, what you're trying to work towards is, you want to know that, hey, if we do X number of activities, and by activities I mean, sending out this many emails or sending this many DMs or anything like that, that it's going to yield Y number of meetings. All right. And then Y number of meetings is going to yield Z number of closed won opportunities. And once you start doing this for, 6 months or so, you're going to really start to know your metrics, and you can start to scale up. If one out of every 100 emails is going to land a meeting, and one out of every 10 meetings is a new business win, you can 10x the number of emails you send out, and you're going to get 10 more meetings and 10 more new clients. So it's simple math. Obviously there are some nuances to all of that, but it gives you a framework that you can, when business is down, you can pull that lever and pull it up. And when maybe you're busy and you're at capacity, you could pull back. But ultimately, you want to work towards understanding what those metrics are, and then that's when you can start leveling up to some level of predictability.
Yeah, I guess it really all does come down to math in the end. Once you have a system that works, and that can probably be the most challenging part, is getting that initial system that works. It's not really scaling that could be the challenge. It's finding out what actually works and then being able to scale it, and then making sure that it scales without breaking too. Because what if that list that you generated that worked and converted X amount of people, well, it ran out, and now I've emailed all of the lawyers that I could find in the United States, and I got to move to Canada, and maybe it's not the same in Canada. You know what I mean? So there are other factors in there, but overall, I completely agree. It's just it becomes a math game once you get that system down that works, and there are a lot of things that works. I can't stand when I hear like gurus out there saying like email is dead or ads are dead or LinkedIn is dead or this is dead, like because they're trying to push their one thing, and the reality is a lot of things work, but they take time, effort, and practice to make sure that you do have the process down, like you said, and then repeat and kind of scale up the math. All right, Christian, my very last question for you is something that I ask every guest that comes on my show. We have a lot of listeners that may be in the early stages of their agency, whether they're just starting out or they've been around for maybe a year or so, and they're trying to scale up themselves. So the last question was very on point, but this one I like to ask everyone: what would be your number one piece of advice for a brand new agency owner that is just starting out today?
I would say the number one piece of advice would be to specialize. I think it's really difficult. There's so much competition that is out there. To just say that, hey, I can do everything under the moon, no one's going to believe that that's possible, especially if you're just starting off. But if you can get really, really, really good at something, and you can do all the things that we talked about here today, you have that thought leadership, you can start building awareness and demand, and if people can start to know you as the person for whatever that happens to be, that is, you can start to really build a business around that one specialization. And then from there, you can start to grow your team, you can start to grow your expertise. But we've seen, and we work with agencies that they might only be 10 people, or less. They might be 5 people, and they're working with Coca-Cola, and they're working with big Fortune 100 type of companies. Now, they're not handling all the marketing for Coca-Cola, obviously, but they might be super good at this one particular area that Coke is having a challenge with. And Coke doesn't care if you're 5 people or 5,000 people. If you can solve that problem that they are experiencing, back to the pivotal problem, they're willing to take a gamble and work with you on it. But it really boils down to, I think, specializing in something as niche as possible to start off with, and then growing and scaling from there.
Could not agree more. Do you mean, though, specialize in a service or specialize in a market to target, or both?
It could probably be both, and probably at that stage it probably should, be both. You might be the TikTok person for soft drinks. I'm making things up right now, but
Yeah,
if
yeah.
I'm Coke and Pepsi and Dr. Pepper and 7 Up, and you are the guru for that, I'll listen to you. Whether you're a one person or 100 person type of firm. So yeah, I think the more you can niche down, whether it be industry, geography, service, targeting a certain audience. We know Gen Z better than anybody else, or millennials or boomers, whatever. Like, however more you can niche down and become the expert in that, I think you'll have a much better success of breaking through.
Love it. Love it. Well, Christian, thank you so much again for hopping on here with this chat. There was tons of golden nuggets, and I'm sure our audience is much more educated for it. So thank you again.
Thank you for having me on, Tyler. This was a lot of fun.